As a foreigner in the Philippines, welcome. Well, we just got back from the church service, and for me that means my Sunday driving job, where I pick up a ton of kids, put them in the back of the truck. No point talking to me about those safety belts and all of those things that you take for granted in the West. We're in the Philippines. Well, on the way back we have to drop off various people. We drop this person off and drop that one off, and well, I just do the driving. I just sit there and I'm the driver. So I have as much to do with a lot of what happens as little as it is possible to do. But one of the people that we dropped off was a relative, a cousin of Nisa, the now infamous case of Nisa. Well, for those, this has become a catchphrase of mine. For those of you who follow our videos, you'll know that the failed case of trying to help Nisa with a severe spinal disorder failed. So yes, a failed case. But during that time we met a cousin who is also very close in that little area where the aunt is, and you saw on one of the final videos of Nisa, you saw the uncle and the aunt, and they were remonstrating with Nisa, saying, well, you should be doing this and should be doing that, and none of that transpired. But it turns out that that there is a story behind the cousin and apparently her sister. Well, the cousin goes back, and this situation that occurred just reminds me of how close everything is here in the Philippines, in the province, and especially I think in these hilltop communities where everybody knows everybody, and a lot of people are all related in some way, however distant. They're not just related, they're connected. And I learned very early on with Beth, when somebody came, and I was still firmly fixed into my Western way of looking at things. And the Western way of looking at things, I think, is to safeguard the self. Always you tend to think of yourself. Or at least I did. Maybe I'm just one of those incredibly selfish people who does that. I didn't think of myself as that, but it turns out that I had a lot to learn about that. Now, how did that come in when just giving a simple ride to a cousin that was in some way connected to the auntie, that was in some way connected to Nisa, that's some way connected to being an old school friend, schoolmate of Beth, everything connected. So we gave a ride to the girl, and she had a son. She dropped off the son, and then there was an exchange of telephone numbers, and Beth says, yes, well, what she's going to do is we are going to text her when we're about to leave the house, and she will be here at the crossroads. It's actually a fork in the road, but Beth calls it the crossroads. So that's what's going to happen. Do I know everything about this situation? But I am about to learn. So it turns out that Beth remembers this girl and feels pity. Now, these words are chosen not from a huge vocabulary of words. They're chosen from a limited vocabulary of words, and sometimes they're not the exact fit, and sometimes they may not suit a lot of people. So when in the West, when you feel pity for someone, it can sometimes mean that you elect to hold yourself at a higher rank or a higher altitude, and that's not the case here. So not from any great elevated idea of themselves. All right, so, or herself, I should say. Well, what came home today was the fact that this lady, this cousin, apparently she holds very fond memories for Beth. Now Beth is someone, when you do something for her, she really never forgets. So if in the past there you've got an outstanding kindness that you've done to Beth, believe me, it will be repaid in full. Now, it reminds me of a story that Beth told on one of our early videos, and that was about how when she first started her job at the hospital, or in the early times when she first got there at the hospital, she was a working student at a hospital, and some money went missing. And because she was the new person on the block, she didn't get the blame for it because they couldn't prove that she had done anything. But she was suspected, and she was the suspect. In fact, it seemed like she was the only suspect. Well, cut a long story short, because you can go and listen to or watch the video and see the whole thing for yourself, she got the blame for doing something of which she was completely innocent, and was later, of course, vindicated because she hadn't done anything, and the real thief was discovered. Now, during that time and in that story, Beth related part of her life story in which, when she was a working student, and literally, and this is hard for perhaps some Westerners to appreciate, is that someone out here can actually not have a few cents in their pocket. I'm not talking about dollars, I'm talking about a few cents, or if you're in the UK, a few pennies, not even for a bus fare. And at that time, Beth got onto a jeepney and got off and didn't pay. And she did that a couple of times, needs must. Now, on one particular occasion, there was a conductor that she didn't realise, and so she was in danger of being busted. So the wife of the jeepney driver was the one that was being the conductor, and she was giving Beth the eye. Beth turned to the person next to her and said, who was a young woman, very similar in age to her, and she said, can you lend me can you borrow me, that's the Filipino expression, can you borrow me the money for the fare? The girl said no. She didn't hesitate. And Beth then looked at the other woman that was there, and the other woman went like that. So Beth was adrift, she was in trouble. Well, an elderly man that was sitting next to her actually said, what is the real situation? Have you left your wallet at home, or do you not have any money? And Beth said, I don't have the money. So the man reached in his pocket and he gave her, I think if I remember rightly, and I could be wrong, I think he gave her 50 pesos. He gave her 50 pesos, which was a great deal of money, because the fare was only about 8 pesos. And she said, I'll get the change. And he said, no, don't do that. You can have, you keep it, and you get some food inside you. And that's just a kindness that he did. Years later, when Beth was in a position of some authority on billing at the hospital, a man came in who was struggling with the payment of a large bill for his wife. Guess who it was? It was that person. And when I was interviewing Beth, I said, and Beth said, so I was able to give him a large discount. Now, The situation was that Beth had the authority to give a discount at her discretion, and that was a normal thing, and there was nothing wrong with that. Now, unfortunately for some people that were watching the video, I asked the question, oh, so you bent the rules and you were able to give him that? And she said yes. So she gave this man, it was the man who had given her that help all those years prior, and she repaid the debt. Well, it's amazing how completely ethical, we've got the ethics of a saint when they're looking at somebody else's situation. And a couple of people said, so, in fact then you were an accessory, you made him an accessory to cheating your employers out of money. And it all got very highfalutin and saint-like, you know. Those people probably at the right hand of God, I can tell you. Well, anyway, that's what happened then. And what it illustrates is not that Beth was a crook or that she cheated her employers or employees out of anything, because she didn't do that. She had the discretion, and she took the discretion and made a judgment call. So she paid back a debt that was long standing by exercising a judgment on something that meant a great deal to an old man trying to pay for the treatment of his wife. Well, what does this have to do with the situation of the cousin and me? Well, what it brought back for Beth was the memory of, I think it was the sister of this cousin, who used to bring her food when she had none. Now, when someone in the Philippines says, I have no food, guess what? They don't mean that they're down to baked beans and rice, or that they may have to have a smaller meal. They mean they've got no food. So there's nothing trivial about it. It's not a trivialized statement. This really means that they don't have anything. When a person says they have no money, they usually mean they don't have a single centavo. So Beth will go out of her way to help that person who helped her. And this is one of the aspects of the Filipino culture which is, I think, difficult for Westerners to grasp, and that is that Filipinos seem to be bonded together in a very basic bond. There is this very basic bond that travels throughout Filipinos, throughout the race. It's almost like it's genetic. And I don't see this anywhere else. I haven't seen this anywhere else. It seems to be uniquely, and maybe I just haven't travelled to the right places, but I haven't seen it anywhere else. Because I've seen people who can look you in the eye, dead cold, and say, I'm sorry you haven't got any food, but I can't help you. Well, she helped that girl, and will text her when we're leaving on a Sunday, and the girl, when we're leaving the house, the girl will have, say, 5 or 10 minutes to get down to the crossroads, as Beth calls it, and she'll be able to get a ride down to the church with us and back. So there's debts being repaid all the time, and people tend to say this about Filipinos, that they don't, when they say, can you borrow me, it's a different use of the word borrow. In the West, if you borrow something, in fact that was on borrowing a tool, people would always say, don't forget it's got a return spring. And when you were a kid, you would say, hi, I can't see a return, I can't see a spring on it. Now, well, it's a special spring. It's a return spring. It means you return it. And that would be the standing joke, but not really. Well, Filipinos tend to go very carefully on saying no when someone asks for money. Now, we were stopped at the road. When we were coming off the road a couple of days ago, we were stopped by this lady who, Beth said later, she had obviously been waiting for us. And she'd been waiting for us to ask for money. Now, she would have hoped to, I don't know, be able to borrow, say, 1,000 pesos or 2,000 pesos. But we don't have that kind of money to be able to be handing out to someone. So do we just say no? That was what I did, very embarrassed to think about it now, but that's what I did when I first came here. Somebody asked me for money, I said, well, no. and maybe even with my Western attitude, feel a little bit self-righteous. Why are you asking me for money? Why should I lend you money? Filipinos don't think that way. Once when someone came to the house and asked for money, Beth gave some of that money. Not all of it, but what we could. We gave what we could. Well, I didn't, but she was in the process of educating me on this, and afterwards she said, it's just that I know how hard it was for that person to ask. The Western, the expat view of how Filipinos can ask for money is that it's real easy. Well, yeah, they'll ask you for money, and they'll hit you up for money, and one expat said, well, what I've learned is that when a Filipino makes friends with you, what they're doing is they're building up a rapport so that sometime down the road they're going to hit you up for money, and that's what's going to happen. They're going to hit. So eventually, face up to it. Any Filipino, no matter who they are, no matter how long you've known them or how short you've known them, they'll hit you up for money. It's genetic. I don't think it's true. I don't think it's true. I was standing in the hardware store and a man tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and he handed me a 500 peso note. Now that is more than an entire day and a half, possibly 2 days' wages for a working Filipino here, especially somebody doing a lowly job. Now, he didn't look as if he was doing a lowly job. He looked pretty prosperous, but he said, this dropped out of your back pocket. And I said, wow, I met an honest man. Well, that hasn't been so unusual for me. I've met a lot of honest men. And I hold that as something that I've learned, and one of the important things that I've learned. And I've also hooked that in, joined that with the idea that when someone does ask you for money here, better think carefully before you say, no, why should I? I don't know you, why should I loan you money? No, like Beth said, she just knows it's so hard to ask. And so I try to remember that now. And what we do, and in the last few days we've been asked quite a few different times for money. And though we can't give what the person would like to receive, we always give something. And it doesn't hurt us. And we are then part of the bond. That's how I think about it. Beth said, think of it as helping. I learned a lot from my Beth. A lot about being humble. A lot about compassion. A lot about pity. It's not pity, it's compassion. It's understanding that the other person may have to help, may have to ask you for help when they are in the most desperate situation, and you may be the only one that can help. So, you need to think very carefully before you say no. This is a foreigner in the Philippines. I hope this has made some sense to you. Bye for now.